Good afternoon. I'm David Shanker, Director of the Linda and Tony Rubin Program on Arab Politics at the Washington Institute for Near East Policy. Welcome today, and thanks for joining us for our policy forum on the future of UNIFIL, the UN Interim Force in Lebanon, and the future of Hezbollah disarmament in Lebanon. Today, there should be a debate in the UN on UNIFIL in New York. The annual vote on UNIFIL's mandate renewal will take place before August 31st. Truth in advertising, during my last stint in the US government when I was working for Secretary of State Pompeo in the first Trump administration, I tried to fix or reform UNIFIL. We are going to actually veto the renewal in the Security Council if there was no move toward reform. Alas, eventually we were forced to settle for less, just a few changes in the mandate after the Beirut port exploded in early August 2020. There are several options now for UNIFIL. There's a technical rollover, a renewal for a year without changes to the mandate. There's a renewal with changes in the troop ceiling, in the mission, and the number of times it's reviewed per year. There's a possibility of a one-year extension with drawdown stipulations. There's a possibility also of a U.S. veto of the mandate renewal and the end of UNIFIL. Currently, there are reports out there that the United States, along with Israel, want to end the deployment of UNIFIL. There's also the discussion with the French, who are the pen holders of the Security Council resolution, of a one-year renewal and then the orderly drawdown or end of the deployment. Both France and Lebanon love UNIFIL. They want UNIFIL to stay in place. This interim deployment has been ongoing for about 45 years and costs the United Nations about $500 million per year, of which the United States covers about 25%. What role is UNIFIL playing in Lebanon now? What, if anything, should be done about UNIFIL? Should the mandate be modified or renewed? Or is it time to finally end UNIFIL? Does deployment merely enable the government of Lebanon to avoid difficult decisions about exercising sovereignty? This debate at the UN doesn't occur in a vacuum. Just weeks ago, the government of Lebanon finally agreed to disarm Hezbollah, not just south of the Litani River, according to UN Security Council Resolution 1701, but to disarm Hezbollah throughout the entirety of Lebanon. That is the implementation of Security Council Resolution 1559. This past Saturday, on August 9th, 6 Lebanese armed forces soldiers were killed in an apparent booby trap explosion while disarming a Hezbollah position in South Lebanon. And just earlier this week, Iranian National Security Council Chief Ari Larijani traveled to Beirut to check in on the status of Iran's #1 proxy force, Hezbollah, and he received quite a mixed reception. To discuss these and other related issues, I'm pleased to introduce our first panel of this policy forum. My guest, Khalil Helou. Khalil is a retired general in the Lebanese Armed Forces who served in the Rangers Regiment and the Hostage Rescue Force of the military's intelligence services, and he's currently an associate professor at St. Joseph University in Beirut. Khalil, you out there?
Hello, yeah. Yes.
It's good to have you. So we've got about 15 minutes. I want to ask you a series of questions. First of all, how's UNIFIL doing? Is it useful? What role is it playing?
Well, the UNIFIL is there since 1978. It was unable to prevent all the wars that occurred in 1982 and then 1992, 1996, 2006, and the last one, 2023 till 2024. Okay, this could be discussed for long hours, but let us remember one thing, that the UNIFIL is in Lebanon under Chapter 6 of the UN. So it is not a strike force. It is just a peacekeeping force. And there is a lot of ambiguity about how to keep the peace. If they cannot use lethal force or implemented by force, it can't be. This was the dilemma since the first beginning. And if we go to chapter 7, and here in Lebanon, a lot of voices have been raised during the past decade in order to find a way to put the UNIFIL under Chapter 7. It means it may become a strike force. But the members of the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council were not in favor of this because the countries that are able to be a significant force are majorly the countries of the permanent, who are permanent members. And they are not eager to get involved in the Middle East. And if I want to go back to 1982, when Israel invaded Lebanon and an international force came to Beirut, US, France, Italy, and Great Britain. It was also not able to impose peace. And we know how the French and the American forces withdrew from Lebanon after attacks from Hezbollah. The US headquarters have been attacked, 250 soldiers fell, and in the French headquarters, the same. So if there is not a major decision on the UN level and to give the UNIFIL or any other force the necessary resources to undergo or to carry out a strong mission, dissuasive mission, either to Hezbollah or to the Hamas or any other force that operates in Lebanon, Daesh, and so on, and to dissuade Israel also. If these conditions are not met, no force in the world could carry out the mission. But on the other hand, let's ask or raise one question. If UNIFIL is not in South Lebanon, what would happen? Now, the Lebanese armed forces should replace UNIFIL. And this is a commitment, and they will have to dispatch forces that are now operating on the northern eastern borders with Syria, 270, 300 kilometers of borders that are very porous, despite the control towers, despite everything, smuggling, and so on. We can say that in the past weeks or the past months, the situation improved hugely on the Syrian border. And actually, cooperation with the current Syrian regime in Damascus is better. It's not perfect. It should be improved, but it's not better than before. But the situation on the border is better. Other missions
So
of the
Khalil,
last.
let me ask you. I'm sorry if the LAF, I know they're underpaid. The salaries are because of the devaluation of the lira. But there's still something like 87,000 troops, men and women under arms, and the
Yes.
Lebanese armed forces, maybe 82,000. The government of Lebanon pledged to put 10,000 troops in the south. There's some 6,000, I think, currently there. If they get
Yes.
10, 12, 15, could they do the job? And what would you assess? How would you assess their performance in the south at disarming Hezbollah until now?
Well, until now, I can say it is satisfactory. You know that hundreds of positions of Hezbollah has been, let's say, secured by the LAF. But what I was trying to say is that the LAF has other missions that are crucial. You know that we have 1 million Syrian refugees in Lebanon, and the terrorist organizations are permanently trying to recruit people among these refugees. And in the past years, the LAF, let's say, prevented many terrorist operations in Lebanon that was supposed to be carried out by these refugees. I'm not talking about the million of refugees. Most of them are poor people, but it is very easy for terrorist organizations to recruit some. So the LAF should have always a permanent eye on these camps that are by hundreds, and also on 12 Palestinian camps, especially Ain al-Hilwi camp. That is a place where Islamist extremist Palestinian organizations are active, the Syrian border, and also the maritime border. So the mission of the LAF is huge. I did not raise the issue of the salaries. We know that. We know that. And despite this situation, the stability in Lebanon is satisfactory. You know, it's maybe astonishing for the Western observers. Now the soldiers are having more vacations to do small jobs around their homes in order to feed their families, and this situation is managed in a satisfactory way. So without the UNIFIL in South Lebanon, we will have to commit maybe the 10,000 more troops in South Lebanon, and these troops will be dispatched from the inside of Lebanon, and this could have consequences on the stability. And stability in Lebanon today is a must because it should go parallel with the stability in Syria. You know, the both countries interact together in many issues. So the role of LAF is not only in South Lebanon. Now, I know that the fund providers to UNIFIL, mainly the United States, they already paid maybe $6 billion for the UNIFIL since 2006, 300 million per year, and the results are not satisfactory. But despite all this, the UNIFIL has been attacked by Hezbollah many times since 2007. It has been also attacked by Daesh and others. It is maybe not fulfilling 100% what the Western powers or Israel desire, but for Lebanon, their presence is important. You hear every now and then that Hezbollah is gathering crowds and they are attacking UNIFIL and forbidding them from doing their missions and so on. So for us, it is important to keep the UNIFIL, and especially the maritime force of UNIFIL. We have 5 ships that are doing very well. They already hailed more than 100,000 ships since 2006, and maybe more than 1,000 ships have been transferred to Lebanese authorities for search. So the Lebanese Navy by itself cannot do this. So the UNIFIL has an air force that is supporting this maritime force. So for all these reasons, we need to keep the UNIFIL waiting for better days.
Thanks. So I'm going to ask you, I think we got time for like 3 more questions, but please, shorter answers, okay? So we can
Short
get this
answers,
in.
okay.
So what's going to happen if and when the Lebanese armed forces moves to disarm Hezbollah north of the Litani?
Okay. Now, things are not white and black. You know that. Now, on the political level, we had a huge, a giant leap. The political cover for Hezbollah weapons have been removed by the Lebanese government, the Lebanese authorities, and no other ministers were opposed to this. This is very important. We were waiting for this since years ago. Now, what is the left going to do? Going into a civil war with Hezbollah is not an option that is desirable. You know, if I can compare with other places in the world where you have armed militias like Hezbollah that is embedded in areas where it has popular support, putting the LAF against Hezbollah in an endless war is not an option. What I think, I don't know what the LAF is going to do, but we are suggesting in the media and through back channels that the plan should be by steps. You have huge areas of Lebanon where Hezbollah is not supported and where the population is against Hezbollah. So we can start by declaring these areas of full sovereignty, no weaponry, no free movement of Hezbollah as it is used to be. And this could be a first step to improve the government's position in negotiating with Hezbollah to withdraw or to accept to give the weapons to the LAF. This could be a good option. Now, the LAF is supported by the majority of the Sunnis, the majority of the Druze, the majority of the Christians, and a part of the Shia. So this is an element of strength. I will not. I am not with. I'm not. I do not favor a military option because we know how it can start, but it will never end, and it will give maybe a political issue to Hezbollah or a political option to embolden on the political level. So what I think is going to happen is that Hezbollah will continue to be there, weaker, very weak compared to before. They will undermine the political process, but there is no return to point zero. There is no return to covering the weapons legally. So the government of Lebanon will be in a better position to negotiate with friends of Lebanon to support the LAF and to support Lebanon in order to let's say, not to disarm Hezbollah, but to weaken Hezbollah more and more and to convince Hezbollah to be integrated in the political process peacefully.
Thanks. One last question for you. There's been recent reports in Lebanon of certain Shiite officers in the Lebanese armed forces who have been
Yes.
relieved of their long-standing commands. Is this, what's happened and why? And is this because of concerns about the LAF splitting along sectarian lines if it moves ahead?
Well, I think that it has been it has been exaggerated by the media because in the Lebanese armed forces, on the 1st of January and the 1st of July, you have a promotion of officers. And immediately after, in the month that comes after, you have the mutations. You have to remove officers because they have been promoted to other functions. Now, there have been a lot of talks about the officer of the southern suburbs of Beirut. Of course, Hezbollah is at ease with him, but he is not the man of Hezbollah. You can't say this. He has not been removed. He has been mutated to another position, and another officer replaced him. Now, it has been exaggerated a lot. Now, we know that the mutation of these positions should pass by the government in the intelligence service in Beirut, in South Lebanon, in Bekaa. And we know that in Bekaa, in South Lebanon, it used to be Hezbollah who says yes for this officer to be there or no. But now they are no more in a position to do that. And this mutation of this officer is a normal process because he's been there since 8 years. So it's time for him to go to another place and to be replaced by another less ranked officer.
Great. Well, this is fascinating, Khalil. I could stay here and talk to you for the rest of the session. Unfortunately, we have another panel coming with some of your neighbors. So we are going to have to say goodbye to you and move on to the Israeli perspective of UNIFIL. But I really appreciate your time and thank you so much. And we'll have you back another time.
Thank you, David. Thank you very
Thank you, everybody. That's the end of our first panel with General Helu. That was fascinating. The takeaway among many, the LAF is overextended and that UNIFIL should stay because they play a useful role. Now we're going to move on to the second panel, where we'll get an Israeli perspective. I'm pleased that we're going to be joined by two real experts of Hezbollah and South Lebanon from Israel. And we have Sarit Zahavi, is she on the screen? Who is a reserve lieutenant colonel in the IDF and founder and president of ALMA, an Israeli institute specializing in security challenges along the Lebanese border. She served for 15 years in the IDF Intelligence Corps and later in Northern Command. And Sarit is going to be joined by my colleague, Washington Institute Reuven International Fellow Asaf Orion. Brigadier General retired Orion is a senior research fellow at INSS and former head of IDF's Strategic Planning Division. Welcome to you both. I don't know if you were in the room watching from the audience of Khalil. I want to ask you some of the same questions. We'll start with you, Sarit. Does UNIFIL play a useful role? The shorter the answers you give, the more questions we'll get through. We have till about 1 o'clock, but I've got a handful for you. Does UNIFIL play any useful role? And can you describe what the force is actually doing, particularly since the ceasefire was signed in November?
Yes, of course. No, the UNIFIL doesn't play any useful role. Actually, UNIFIL is playing a damaging role with regard to the mission of disarming Hezbollah in South Lebanon. We can roll now the first video that actually shows that while we were maneuvering in Lebanon, the IDF found the tunnel, one out of many underground infrastructures very close to a UN post. Now, why is this important to show specifically this example? As I've said, one out of many, because this is clear evidence that the problem is not with the mandate. UNIFIL mandate enables it to patrol freely in open areas to search for those places exactly, and you can see the weapons that were found in those tunnels. And UNIFIL did nothing. There were 28 positions, including watching towers of Hezbollah when the war started all across the borderline, and many, many underground infrastructures and hidden places of munition between the trees, areas that UNIFIL was supposed to patrol, and it didn't do anything about it. During the war, UNIFIL not only was useful, it also disturbed the IDF from fulfilling the mission of disarming Hezbollah in South Lebanon. It refused to evacuate. We asked it to evacuate because it's a war zone. It refused to evacuate, and it even created patrols during battles between Israel and Hezbollah, and that way making us cease fire to make sure that they are not getting hurt, and that way enabling Hezbollah just to run away during the battlefield, during crossfire. What is happening today is that we see that UNIFIL is, whenever UNIFIL is trying, and this is on daily basis, trying to patrol independently, trying to patrol in areas where there is Hezbollah or areas that put at risk Hezbollah weapons, they are being beaten, they are being blocked, Hezbollah doesn't let them pass, they are being stoned. This is happening every day, almost every day in South Lebanon, and in most cases it is also filmed and published in the social media. UNIFIL is publishing that it had found around 300 weapon storages since the war ended. They published one picture of a Hezbollah launcher only last week, after 19 years, since 1701 actually accepted exactly 19 years ago and 2 days. And the ceasefire started of that war in 2006, exactly 19 years ago. UNIFIL showed us one picture of one launcher, multiple barrels launcher, that was found last week, a launcher of Hezbollah, not a launcher of Palestinian factions, Hamas, whatever, a launcher of Hezbollah for the first time with a UNIFIL soldier holding the launcher. And it is clear to me that this picture was published because we are talking about an option of canceling completely the mandate.
Asaf, do you agree with that assessment?
I would add that for some years we enjoyed UNIFIL's liaison options or capabilities. These were now supplemented or even replaced by the US and French-led implementation and monitoring mechanism, which I would say marginalized UNIFIL. Definitely without Chapter 7, they could have at least reported the situation, because if we followed the UN reports about what's happening in southern Lebanon, one cannot explain where did this war come from. If only Israeli allegations were there, which UNIFIL cannot independently verify, and you can see it report after report. So what are we reporting about in this sense? And when you add the political issue, so two aspects. One is that UNIFIL is there to support the Lebanese armed forces and to perform whatever the Lebanese government asked it to do. But as long as the Lebanese government does not demand that UNIFIL disarms or do whatever, or does whatever needs doing against prohibited arms, the effectivity will remain very low. The reports will continue to disrepresent or misrepresent reality. LAF gets, a free pass for trying hard, but it doesn't do what it needs to be doing, even in not blocking UNIFIL access to places, because LAF is also involved in this. So I think the bottom line right now balance, the current balance, is that it's better to do without it. But then there's a question of transition and political capability and so on. I'll stop here.
Yeah, I don't want to get ahead of ourselves because we'll get there. But can you tell me, Asaf, back to you, has anything changed since November with UNIFIL? Since the ceasefire, since the decimation of Hezbollah, are they going on to private property? Is there any notable difference?
I'm hearing several angles. One is that there is a good improvement after the change of command from the Spanish back to the Italian command, which is the Italians were always better in understanding the reality around them. And I'll save you the juicy stories. UNIFIL found, as Sarit mentioned, hundreds of sites. One immediately has to ask, where have you been until now? If you didn't get any new authority, how is it that suddenly you find those things? I think we can see an uptick in the assaults against UNIFIL, and even the brazenness of videoing it and uploading it to the web. So everybody can see a Finnish peacekeeper getting slapped on the face by one of the angry civilians. And I do not see yet the Lebanese government perform its duty as a host nation to actually guarantee the safety and security of UNIFIL. So I think those are the great changes, and not for good.
Let me take the opportunity for the viewing audience. If you'd like to ask questions of our panelists during the event, please enter them into the Zoom Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. And if you're watching this policy forum on YouTube or on our website, you can email your questions to policyforum@washingtoninstitute.org. Sarit, we were just talking about the attacks on these UNIFIL peacekeepers. Clearly, well, if you read the UNIFIL report, these are plainclothes civilians. But if not, let's assume that they are Hezbollah supporters. certainly the government of Lebanon has never done anything about the assaults on UNIFIL. Is it true that UNIFIL really that Hezbollah really dislikes UNIFIL? They didn't do anything for all these years. Certainly, there are benefits to Hezbollah from having UNIFIL there.
So there are allegedly two contradicted trends here. On the one hand, Hezbollah in its social media platforms for years had a campaign that called UNIFIL Zionist agents, and they called UNIFIL out. And it's funny that for the first time I agree with Hezbollah, and I think that UNIFIL should be out. But Hezbollah, for its part, they don't want to have 10,000 soldiers of UNIFIL. This is too much. They don't need all of that. It's just between their legs, even though UNIFIL is not truly effective. At the same time, it's important to say that Hezbollah took advantage of UNIFIL. During the war, it was very, very clear. They became human shields for UNIFIL. There were rockets who were launched from next to UNIFIL positions. I'm asking to put now the second video, which is very important because this video was published in the media in Lebanon, of South Lebanon, just before the war in April of 2023. And this video was filmed very close to the border, actually where we've been, not far from the opening of the tunnel, next to a community named Zarit, an Israeli community named Zarit. And the video was filmed on the Lebanese side of the border, and you can see that they are training to kidnap somebody. And it's a training with weapons, with uniforms, and all of this is happening right next to a UN position. And if you know the area, this UN position is on top of a hill that is watching all over the area. So I can see it from my neighborhood. Hezbollah used them as human shields deliberately, launching rockets from their places, and also was freely active in those places. By the way, next to this UN position, there was a Lebanese army watching tower that Hezbollah also used for its own military purposes.
Saf, I know that we've spoken about this before. I mean, UNIFIL builds a lot of soccer fields for Lebanese kids in the South, right?
Well, you know, it's an interesting point to connect. As General Hilu said, they don't have a Chapter 7, authorities and permissions. So supposedly with no authority to use force. But in fact, the mandate says that, and the resolutions of the UN say that the force commander can use whatever force he deems within his capabilities that is needed for the mission. And we see that they are very, very cautious not to use force, even in self-defense. So why? Because the force commanders, over the ages said, I must have the support of the communities. And then there are some kind of buyouts activities that are called community projects. They build soccer fields. They do dental, clinics. I saw immunization or against livestock maladies. The Indian battalion is famous for that, building up water issues. But they're also doing all the benign things to try to curry favor with the Muhtars, with the communities, and with those who attack them. And as an Italian general told me once, he said, I'm from Sicily. Don't you think I know a mafia when I see it? And I think UNIFIL in this sense is depicted as the shield of Israel, but in fact, it's another hostage to Hezbollah, which also influences the reports of the troop contributing countries.
Interesting. So, Sarit, what would happen if UNIFIL mandate wasn't renewed? Would we notice? What would the difference be?
Just before answering your question, I just have to make one more note to continue what Asaf said. I don't, well, and maybe it's also connected to your question. I don't think we need soldiers to distribute humanitarian aid. If the UN wants to have an organization to provide humanitarian aid and build soccer field and provide water or food to the South Lebanese population, there are tons of frameworks to do that. I don't think we need 10,000 soldiers for that. Another thing that is important to say is that UNIFIL reported right after the war, during the war, about the destruction in South Lebanon by the Israeli attacks against Hezbollah's infrastructures in the villages. But since they are operating in Lebanon, there is no one to balance that with the damages that we have suffered here in the northern part of Israel. Nobody is reporting on our damages. There is no international or UN organization that actually gave assistance to the Israelis that were evacuated for a year and a half from their homes in the past year and everything that we experienced over here. They talk about the damage without any context in their Twitter account, just as if they can prevent those damages in the future. So to take it to your question of what will happen if UNIFIL will be gone, it eventually will bring more responsibility on the Lebanese armed forces that will have no excuses anymore, that they don't have enough manpower, that they don't have enough money. I don't know. I believe that most of the money that is going today to UNIFIL will go to the Lebanese armed forces. That's one thing. But another thing is that we will stop with creating a few different parallel realities and narratives around what is truly happening in South Lebanon. And eventually it will create a situation of one narrative, and it will be clear to everybody what is going on. Because as Asaf described, the reports of UNIFIL throughout the past 19 years, they describe a totally different reality that nobody can understand. How come there was war here? If you just read those reports. Once it will be the responsible of the Lebanese armed forces, it will be the state of Lebanon that will be completely responsible to what's happening. And with regard to moderation, we don't need them anymore to moderate. We have others that are doing them better than them, which is the United States and France, and the mechanism and the moderation process is pretty much working. With having said all of that, I really want to emphasize that what the Lebanese armed forces is doing today in South Lebanon is very, very far from being satisfying. Even though General Khalil talked about hundreds of weapon storages that were found, again, we saw very few pictures of those. We don't know whether these are useful weapons or weapons that were already attacked and the Lebanese armed forces is just taking them away. They are not entering to search for those weapons in the houses. And here we don't have a problem of mandate to enter into the private territories. And it is clear that much of those weapons of Hezbollah are hidden in the private territories. And we don't know what the LAF is doing with the weapons that it is finding. Because in the past, we have seen launchers that were traced by LAF, and at the same day, went back to Hezbollah. In the morning, they seized them, and in the evening, they gave them back to Hezbollah. And I don't know what is happening with the munition that is being found now.
Asaf, do you have anything to add to the, what would happen if UNIFIL departed, or do you want to move on to an assessment of the Lebanese armed forces in the south?
I think very little. If you read the reports, yes, there are, I think, essential functions now helping, like explosive ordnance disposal. That's an important function. Maybe some medical services, so the communities will feel the lack of that. Liaison, we have alternatives. It would be useful if the US and French effort will dwindle, which is a possibility, because we're already hearing that the mechanism is not as powerful and energetic as before. I think it's important also to say something about the Maritime Task Force, because it's a classic.
I was going to ask you, so is there a way that you can keep the Maritime Task Force, to keep the parts you like and get rid of the parts that are less useful?
We need to be aware of how UNIFIL operates on the narrative building. They present a lot of optics and a lot of efforts, but very little results. General Hilu said they hailed tens of thousands of ships, and about 1,000 ships were checked by the Lebanese armed forces. In all my years, I remember one case in which a ship was seized carrying weapons for the Syrian rebels. So when it was actually against Hezbollah, that was the only moment when something was caught in this effort. Now, multiply 19 years by 6 or 5 frigates or corvettes. It's not a very useful, I don't think that any nation state would actually approve such a huge force at $500 million a year for so poor results. So I think we need to either cut it off, or if we need transitional phases, to scale it down, to watch it very closely, to have a grip on whatever they're doing, and actually hold them to account on the actual output, and not just the efforts or the number of patrols and so on and so forth.
So let me ask you both. You're both keen observers of South Lebanon, of Lebanon in general. How would you assess the Lebanese armed forces' capabilities? Could they move forward with actually a more robust mission? We heard that the LAF is overstretched from General Helou. Could they do this? Do they have the capabilities? Could they disarm Hezbollah not only in the south but further north? Sarit?
Look, on the one hand, I agree with the General Helou that it's a gradual process and it will take time. I also agree that we cannot put all the onus on the Lebanese armed forces. There are things that could be done that are not only around physical disarmament of Hezbollah, but also weaken it politically, and maybe I should say taking care of the civilian branch of Hezbollah, because Hezbollah is a state within a state, not only with regard to its weapons. And in order to truly bring to a situation of prospect and change in Lebanon, we need to address all those issues, like closing the banks of Hezbollah, the schools of Hezbollah, the hospitals of Hezbollah, and making sure that there is truly one state in Lebanon, and not only with regard to two armies in Lebanon. This is what I mean. But at the same time, I just finished my sentence. At the same time, and I feel that this is what the Lebanese are expecting, you cannot expect Israel to give up its security needs in light of everything that just happened in the past 2 years before this process is happening in Lebanon. And that's why Israel should be capable of doing what nobody else is capable of doing, whether the UNIFIL or the Lebanese armed forces, which is attacking Hezbollah every day. And if we will not do that, and this is happening every day, if we will not do that, Hezbollah will succeed in recovering, and Hezbollah is trying to recover as we speak.
Asaf?
Well, the key to defeating Hezbollah is first and foremost political. And for a very long time, since 2006, the government more or less, maybe not happily, but they provided the cover and allowed Hezbollah to continue. Now we hear, I think, a great improvement on the declaratory level, on statements, on, we are committed to the monopoly and to of arms and to our sovereignty. Now we need to put it to the test of implementation, just like General Helou said. So they talk the talk. That's a big improvement. Do they walk the walk? Now we are all, supposed to be terrorized by the specter of civil war. But we have an even lower hanging fruit, and that's the Palestinian armed factions. And Lebanon already stated that that's within the scope. Have we seen real progress? Doing it by dialogue. The Palestinians are out of the food chain in Lebanon. They're out of the pecking order in this sense. So this could have been a great test to see. We all remember that the Lebanese armed forces went into Nahr el-Bared and other refugee camps after jihadis. So jihadis are a good game. Palestinians can be discussed with, negotiated with, disarmed. Hezbollah can also gradually be disarmed, but they need to be held, the Lebanese need to be held with their feet to the fire to make sure it continues. It doesn't have to be overnight. And the ultimate backstop is, as Sarit said, Israeli enforcement. Now, the Lebanese must, on the one hand, condemn it because, it violates their sovereignty. But on the other hand, that's the only thing that actually stopping Hezbollah from coming back at them, not only at us. So I think it's a complicated situation. But in all the things we said, UNIFIL doesn't really have a role. How does it, play out? By taking LAF's place, by doing patrols and being stopped because LAF is not with them, take the money that is now paid for other armies and build LAF capabilities. I think that's easy algebra.
Great. Once again, if anybody out there has any questions for the panelists, please enter them into the Zoom Q&A. So let me ask you, both of you, and then Sarit, I'll ask you about the Barak plan. But first, Israel occupies 5 points in South Lebanon right now. These are a source of some contention. We hear about them from the Lebanese quite a bit. Are they any longer strategically important? Could the LAF occupy these sites? Could UNIFIL occupy these sites? Why do you have to be there? And what would happen? What would be the implication for Israel's security if these points in South Lebanon were withdrawn?
To answer as a resident of the North, and I will leave Asaf to answer from the operational point of view. If IDF will not be there, the people of the North that left their houses for a year and a half and came back after the Israeli government stopped the compensation will not be there. They will not live next to a border that on the other side, they see Hezbollah flags, and there is again a monster that is willing to massacre them, exactly like Hamas had done in October 7th. This is the atmosphere here in the North today. We all understand that we were lucky, and the people that just came back to their homes after a year and a half are looking to those 5 hills, and they are telling me clearly, if IDF was not there, we were not here.
Asaf?
Well, several layers here. First, I think you can hear Sarit expressing the post-traumatic mindset in Israel. Having zero tolerance for new risk. Having, I would say, a tendency to go out, to go forward, to buffer between our border communities and whatever is on the other side, to preempt and to prevent whatever emerging threats are there. Now, you propose that it will be UNIFIL or Lebanese armed forces. That's a basic question of trust. Do we trust UNIFIL to make sure that no Hezbollah return to those places and builds new positions and establish themselves as a new fire base into the settlements or the communities, the kibbutzim and so on? Can we trust the Lebanese armed forces when they are saying we are not confrontational? So if you can't confront Hezbollah, which is contesting the authority of the state, how can we trust this? So basically, I think as long as the Lebanese armed forces in Lebanon do not assert their sovereignty or in the other places where Israel is not there, showing that no Hezbollah will pass, that it's an airtight security arrangement, not before that you can see some experimentation. And down the road, if you have ironclad guarantees, you could see Israel saying, okay, let's do a test on one specific site, one of the 5 or maybe another places which overlook our own communities.
If I'm going back to terrain, those 5 points are 5 hills. These 5 hills are watching towards all over the Galilee, and they are especially watching communities, meaning that when people in the Israeli communities next to the border, meters away from the border, are opening the window, they see the IDF position on top of them, and the IDF position can see the Israeli community and can see the Lebanese side at the same time. And that way they can respond very, very quickly if there is a terrorist risk to those people who are living there.
Thanks. So I know that you've written about this, about the Barak paper, Tom Barak, the U.S. Special Envoy, the reason why Lebanon is moving ahead right now with the disarmament. We heard, months ago from the government of Lebanon, from the president, from the prime minister, that they were committed to a state monopoly on weapons, and sovereignty of the state. But they didn't really move forward on disarmament or the idea of a disarmament in the whole country until just days ago, when we had the cabinet ministers take this vote or make the decision, and that was all because of this Barak paper. Can you tell us a little bit about what this paper proposed?
So yes, there was a government decision on Thursday to order the LAF to disarm Hezbollah in a gradual process until the end of the year, until 2025. This is very ambitious, and we just discussed the options here and what's the capabilities. For me, again, the process of around 6 months of disarmament of Hezbollah was going hand in hand with the Israeli withdrawal from those 5 positions, and with the Israeli ceasing its attacks against Hezbollah that, as I've said, is happening now almost every day, sometimes twice a day. And I just wanted in my paper to put some food for thought of how do we make sure that this is not just another piece of paper, because I experienced firsthand, and Asaf as well, the war in 2006, that many promises were made and nothing was actually implemented. And also back then, everybody were talking about a national dialogue in Lebanon and about weakening Hezbollah, etc. So some of it are already mentioned, which is the question of where exactly the Lebanese army is going to search for those Hezbollah's weapons, how the disarmament process is going to work, the fact that Hezbollah is hiding weapons in private territories, the amount of weapons. I can say that the IDF, when it pulled out of Lebanon, it made an exhibition of really unbelievable amount of weapons and boxes of munition and mortars and anti-tank missiles that were presented to the people, to the audience, to the public, and to the press. And nothing like this was presented by the Lebanese armed forces. So basically, if the Lebanese armed forces is to disarm Hezbollah, we need to see proofs. This is very important. The second thing is the fact of what are we going to do with those weapons. And another point here that I didn't even mention in my report is the risk that Hezbollah will be embedded in the Lebanese armed forces, like the process that is now happening in Syria, that you will see Hezbollah joining the Lebanese armed forces as another militia instead of completely disarming. So this is also a huge risk, and for me, that's the worst case scenario. And another question is where exactly the Lebanese armed forces is going to disarm Hezbollah. Since 1701, he's talking about South Lebanon, an area of 27 kilometers, which the IDF maneuvered only in 7 kilometers from that. And we have another UN resolution, 1559, which is older than that is talking about completely disarming Hezbollah. So I think we should understand each other with the expectations of what exactly do we want, and we should remember that as we speak, Hezbollah is rebuilding its power north to the Litani River. That's the main focus of Hezbollah today, understanding that south to the Litani River is becoming more and more problematic for it. So we can end up in a situation that basically Hezbollah is becoming a monster again, but north to the Litani River, 27 kilometers from Israel in most places. By the way, there are places that it's much less than that, and nothing will be solved. The bottom line is that I just want to see deadlines and also benchmarks that will prove that something is really happening. And all of that should be combined, as I've said, with the actions which are not exactly in the military field, as I've mentioned, also around the state within the state, the civilian infrastructures of Hezbollah.
Asaf, any quick comment on the Barak paper?
Beyond the paper, I think the question is, how do we retain U.S. focus and attention and continuity in leadership? Because we had Amos Hochstein, and later Morgan Ortagus, and now Tom Barak, and maybe Ortagus is back. Who's leading that? You know, and they're all meeting Nabi Berri, who is there, you know, from the Ottoman times. So I think the question of continuity, of focus, of not putting Lebanon as an afterthought to Turkey and Syria and so on, we must remember that this until the November last year, it was the #1 military threat to Israel on its borders. And now, after Iran was hit and Hezbollah took serious blows, it's very tempting to say, okay, let's go for really interesting things, or let's put it on a back stove or kick the can. I think the main challenge is how to maintain urgency and focus and attention and continuity. This is why UNIFIL is a good platform to discuss Lebanese affairs. This is why we need to create a tempo of meeting every half a year and not every August when everybody is on vacation. So
that wasn't that wasn't you know, that was planned, obviously.
At least I found out in my research that until 2006 it was twice a year, just as the Andof mission. But in 2006, it was turned over to be 1 year, and it immediately slows down the pace of having, you know, keeping it seized of the matter.
Yeah, so there's a tremendous opportunity here, I think. And I think a loss of attention. I think Syria certainly sucked the air out of the room, seemed to be for a brief period of time more promising and had more momentum, and so attention has shifted. Asaf, I think we got from you what you want to do with the mandate, what you think should be done on the 31st. But if you want to clarify that, you got 1 minute, and then we'll go for the final word to what Sarit would like to see happen on UNIFIL.
I'll put it simply. If it can't be fixed thoroughly, given all the political and diplomatic obstacles, it needs to be next.
Got it. And Sarit?
I have 2 notes. First, I can just drop the if. I don't see how it can be fixed. It's so that much broken that it's not going to be fixed, and that's why it should be canceled. And my second note is, since I'm being asked a lot about the option of normalization with Lebanon, I will see normalization in the horizon line once we will be able to have a panel here with General Khalil Khilo online with us.
Inshallah, we can do that. We will be able to do that soon. I'd like to thank you, Sarit, my colleague Asaf, and from panel 1, General Khalil Khilo, who's no longer with us. But thank you all for participating. I think this was a fascinating the overview and detailed look at developments in Lebanon, at what should be done with UNIFIL, and the prospects for moving ahead on disarmament. So thank you all in the audience for joining us, and we'll see you again soon at the Washington Institute. Thank you.